What's up, my wizards? It's Big D from Mtg down there on your YouTube screen. We like it a magic. And you know what? Y'all ready for this? That's right. Core Set 2020 spoilers started fish today, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about, so we don't have much time to waste. Go ahead and get to it, because there's some good curds. Let's start things off with a light breakfast of reprints here, because we got to see Disenchant, Unsummon, Negate, and Disfigure to kind of start things off today. And there's some cool things about all of these. Disenchant, yeah, there are better options than Standard at this point, but we haven't had Disenchant in a good long time, it feels like. And if nothing else, it's going to be sweet to have this as an option in games 2 and 3 during the pre-release. So definitely has a function. It's just cool to have Disenchant back. Same with Unsummon, although I think it might be a little bit more impactful than a card like Disenchant in Standard, because mono blue tempo decks might start wanting to use this card. It's cool that they might have access now to this, just 1 mana, pop a thing back to your hand spell, which is pretty good, not only against your opponent's creatures, but it's decent with stuff like Merfolk Trickster and whatnot. So I could definitely see Unsummon maybe having some sort of, real effects on Standard, but it's highly unlikely at present, because I'm not even sure this helps mono blue that much, and that's the one deck you'd think it would go into. But I'm glad to have Unsummon back one way or the other. You kind of got to have Negate in like every Standard environment. I know there's some people actually groaning about this card being reprinted, and I can understand that, but Negate is just one of those cards that kind of has to exist. It's a perfect Magic card, so I'm never going to be mad about Negate existing. But Disfigure, pretty happy about being back. This could replace Moment of Craving when rotation hits in the fall. It seems like I've already seen a lot of people here at the beginning of spoiler season who have the idea that M19 is going to rotate out when Core Set 2020 drops, and that's just not the case. I want to go ahead and address that, because rotation in Standard never happens if it's not the fall. Basically, rotation's always going to happen in the fall, and so M19 and M20 are going to be playable in the same Standard together for the next 3 months or so. Keep that in mind. And while we do have M19 in Standard, I think Moment of Craving is the better choice for a lot of decks that would want to run a card like this, but once it does rotate out, this is just half the cost of Moment, and so it's definitely worth considering. Now, apart from those reprints, there are a couple of commons that looked a little meh, but I want to go ahead and blast through these so we can get to the real stuff, because there's a lot of real stuff today. So let's take a look at Octoprophet and Chandra's Embercat. Chandra's Embercat is great in terms of flavor, at least, and it's a bear with upside, 2 mana, 2/2, Elemental Cat. You can tap it to add a red, but you can only spend that mana to cast Elementals, or you can cast the Chandra Planeswalker with that mana too. So you can hit a 4 mana Chandra on turn 3 with an Embercat, which is actually not too bad, and this is Elemental too, so it works with like 6 mana Chandra as well. There's some cool things about Embercat, but I'm really not seeing it in the context of Standard. It's also got the best flavor text possibly of all time. Just point that out. This card is famous for nothing else other than being a Fire Cat, which is like the coolest Pokemon ever. This actually has ridiculously awesome flavor text. Yes, it does, Ziggy. You're a Fire Cat. Anyway, there's also Octoprophet, which is more or less the sweetest flavor ever. Even though these commons aren't really much to write home about in the playability department, and I might eat my words on Embercat, because again, if Chandra.deck is a real list, then Embercat might go in. It's just a ramp piece, but Octoprophet probably won't go in like anything Standard related, but it's at least a decent looking limited card, just 4 mana for a 3/3 Octopus. And when Octoprophet enters the battlefield, you scry too, so it's like an Omen Speaker that's just way fatter. It's because the tentacles give it extra power. But, again, fine and limited, but probably won't see its way out of that format ever. Now, apart from the cards that we've already talked about today, this is where things start getting really interesting, and we got to see a bunch of really neat cards today. Some of them uncommons that look like they're not quite up to snuff, but they're still worth talking about. For instance, Angel of Vitality. I like this card a lot. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/2 flying angel, and if you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. And Angel of Vitality gets +2/+2 as long as you have 25 or more life. First of all, just in Commander, it's a good card, right? It started 40 in Commander. This is just a 3 mana 4/4 flyer, which is great in most contexts, but especially in like decks that want to gain life anyway. It's a really good card, and that's where we need to talk about it for other formats, because although I don't think this is there for Modern or anything, it's at least like considerable in Soul Sisters. You just gain twice as much life from creatures entering the battlefield as you normally would. Really like that. But in Standard, where it's a little bit more in the conversation, We have some good cards for this, like alongside Resplendent Angel, this turns a bunch of stuff that would normally just gain you 4 life into something that gains you 5 life, which is much better if you have a Resplendent Angel out. And hey, even if you just have like Resplendent Angel plus Lyra Dawnbringer out, then having this out means that Resplendent Angel can give you a 5/5 Angel without actually having to activate its ability. So that's really nice to not have to spend 6 mana as long as you have this exact combination of cards out. But it works with a bunch of other stuff, so again, so long as you have a Resplendent Angel out. For instance, you could always just go like Knight of Autumn, gain the 4 life, that turns into 5 and gets you an Angel. Inspiring Cleric turns into 5 life, gets you an Angel. Even like Centaur Peacemaker, better cards like Enter the God Eternals, but that's a little bit harder to get the casting cost. And then like Ritual of Rejuvenation looks like a much better card if you have a Resplendent Angel in this out. Plus Invoke the Divine. Even though I'm not quite sure that it's really there in Standard, there's a ton of stuff that it could potentially work with. There's a lot of life gain stuff in Standard right now. Now let's check out Creeping Trailblazer. This is 2 mana, a red and a green for a 2/2 elemental. Other elementals you control get +1/+0. And you can pay 2, a red and a green, to have Trailblazer get +1/+1 until end of turn for each elemental you control. Alright, so the Elemental Lord, the Lord of Elementals this time around, is red and green. So is red-green elementals with like Chandra a real deck? I don't know, probably not. Probably not. Bear with Upside's nice, and I usually like these 2 mana lords, your Legion Loyalists or whatever it's called. I think the Legion Lieutenant, excuse me, that's Loyalist, the whole other card. Your Legion Lieutenants, your Merfolk Mistbinders and such, but I'm still not quite sure this is there. Although, obviously, if you're playing Elementals in Standard, you're playing 4 copies of this, but I guess this could also go in plenty of Commander decks for what that's worth too. I mean, a 2 mana lord is always good to have, but I'm not quite sure that it's at the level it needs to be. Let's check out Devout Decree next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a sorcery. Exile target creature or planeswalker that's black or red. Scry 1. Alright, well the sorcery speed and the narrower range of targets just make this a worse Celestial Purge, which already looks like a really good color hosing card, but wasn't like the most played card in sideboards when it was in Standard, so I'm not like entirely convinced that this is amazing, but at the same time, I will say that just the ability to take out any old creature or planeswalker that's a certain set of very desirable colors and getting to scry is pretty good. You know, scrying is always better than it looks, and it's usually worth the extra mana a card like this might cost, but this doesn't cost any extra mana. Again, it just has a narrower range of targets, and the thing that's really hurting it is the sorcery speed, but I still think this could be a good enough color hoser that it works its way into Standard sideboards. Whether it's better or worse than Celestial Purge or not, it's still going to see its way into a sideboard here or there, because this is going to kill new Chandra and new Liliana, and that's probably good enough by itself, but there's a ton of other red creatures and black creatures that you might want to kill while you're on your way. Things like Skargan Hellkite, blah blah blah. There's just a ton of good targets for this. Now here's a cool uncommon though. This is Chandra's Spitfire. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 1/3 elemental with flying. And whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, Chandra's Spitfire gets +3/+0 until end of turn. I like this with Sorin. Just say that, first of all. You know, Sorin can give it a +3/+0 every single turn and bring it back if it ever dies. So keep that in mind. I know a lot of people are talking about just burn your opponent. Hit him with a shock and a lightning strike and then crush for 6. Like, yeah, that seems pretty good right there, but I just want to take a different angle and say the words Sorin to you. And there's a bunch of other ways to deal non-combat damage in this set right now. Not only, by the way, things like burn, but also, imagine this, in like a Judith deck. Now bear with me here, because you've got cards like Heartfire and stuff in that deck, but you've also got Footlight Fiend and Judith herself, which will deal non-combat damage, when stuff dies. And that actually seems great. You know, Dreadhorde Butcher too. Like, all of this is non-combat damage. So you're going to have turns where your Spitfire gets to like 9 power pretty easily. That seems ridiculous. So there's a few decks you could put this in right away, but the first is obviously Burn, and in a format with plenty of shocks and lightning strikes and stuff like that, I could definitely see this card actually working. Again, it shouldn't be too difficult to get this to, 6. Fairly easy, you've got Fire Sheen of Pyromancer and Wizard's Lightning in this format as well, plus things like Light Up the Stage to help you, get more burns, skewer the critics, blah, blah, blah. So this could be a great card as a 4-of in just a mono-red burn deck, and it could push that deck to the forefront, but I remain unconvinced I remain unconvinced, but it won't be too hard to get me to the other side of the fence on this one. I think this could be a premier uncommon in this set. But that said, it could also not be. I mean, those are the two options. I don't seem particularly prescient or smart for saying the obvious here, but I do think there's like a 60% chance at least that this does things in Standard. Speaking of uncommon 3-mana flyers, though, here's Empyrean Eagle, 3 mana, like I said, 1 a blue and a white, for a 2/3 bird spirit with flying, and other creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. Alright, so look at this one of two ways. You either don't have to play favorable wins anymore, or you get 8 favorable wins. Seems pretty good to me, especially considering there are a ton of really good white and blue flying creatures on the lower end of the curve. Everything from Siren Siren Stormtamer, to like, you know, Silverbeak Griffin and Tomik and stuff like that at the 2-drop slot. There's a lot of good stuff for this deck right now, and although I'm still not sure that it's like 100% there, I'm not sure blue-white flyers ever will be in Standard. Outside of the Spirits deck from Standard a couple of years ago, that was good. That deck just goes to show you need a ton of like value creatures and creatures that actually do stuff when they enter the battlefield. And I'm just not sure that blue-white flyers is going to be anywhere near the level that a deck like Spirits was. But this is a really good piece for it, and if nothing else, a budget deck is really shaping up to look kind of powerful to me. Great piece for it. But there's another 3-mana uncommon that got previewed today that I'm not quite as high on as some players, and that's Ironroot Warlord. This is 3 mana, 1 a green and a white for a star 5 Treefolk Soldier. And Ironroot Warlord's power is equal to the number of creatures that you control. And you can pay 3 a green and a white to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. I feel like this is an easy evaluation. It doesn't do anything the turn it comes into play unless you have all of the mana, and even if you do have all the mana, it still really kind of doesn't do enough. You know, it's only really good if you're already kind of ahead on board. You know, if you've already got a relatively big enough board to make this a big creature, then you're probably already winning the game anyway, so it feels win more. 5 mana to make a token in Standard isn't great either. There's just kind of a lot of things holding this card back. But there's a bunch of uncommons today that I have like no negative words for, so I guess we'll start that train with Yarok's Finlurker. This is a sweet card, y'all. This is 2 black mana for a 1/1 horror, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand. What? And then you can pay 2 and a black to have Finlurker get +1/+1 till end of turn. Alright, so it's like a much better Burglar Rat with the shade like pump ability, the black fire breathing ability. And I know Burglar Rat's not the best card in the world, but at least this gets around, you know, things that Burglar Rat sucks at. You know, like Burglar Rat is obviously really bad against like Phoenix decks. They'll drop a Phoenix in the graveyard and laugh at you. Nullhide Ferox, this is good against, whereas Burglar Rat is terrible against. You want to give him a turn 2 Ferox, I guess you can. But this gets around that clause, so that's pretty sweet. Note the opponent is not actually discarding. They're exiling a card from their hand. And this is always going to be a difficult choice against almost any deck, even if they can't get value out of their graveyard. But any deck that can get value out of their graveyard, Burglar Rat really isn't doing much against, and most discard isn't. The difference between exiling a card from their hand and making them discard is actually much deeper than I think a lot of players realize, so I really like this card. There's also Cryptic Caves. This is a sweet uncommon too. It's just a land that you can tap for a colorless, but you can also pay 1 and tap it and sack it to draw a card. But you can only do that if you already control 5 or more lands. Well, right now, Standard is like really focused on multicolor. You know, a lot of like 2 and 3 color decks in Standard that play a lot of multicolored cards. One of the best decks is like Esper Hero. Plays almost nothing but multicolored stuff. So I'm not entirely sure that we can see, you know, that these colorless lands are going to see a lot of play. You know, Blast Zone has seen a fair amount of play, but Blast Zone will probably keep this from seeing play. If you're going to play a colorless land in your deck, that's probably going to be the one. If not that, probably Field of Ruin. So there are a few cards keeping this thing from seeing play, but this is, I know, my breath smells like coffee, and you love it, Bubba. But, jeez, you just jumped up on me to give me a kitty kiss. Which is very sweet of you, but it's just because you like my sugary sweet coffee breath. Anyway, I know. Sacking a land in the late game to draw a card is just good. It's just good on its face, and I shouldn't even have to explain why that's good. It's very good. In the late game, to just have like a canopy, a horizon land, basically. You know, we're just talking about how good this ability is in a format like Modern. And yeah, sometimes that's contingent upon being able to do it a little bit earlier in the game than you can with this. But Standard games tend to go a little bit later. You know, obviously. So the ability to just sack this in the late game, get a card off of it, is really, really big. And in decks that can fit a bunch of colorless lands, this is going to be an important one. But let's finish off the uncommons here, because There's some really good uncommons today. First of all, Thrashing Brontodon also got reprinted, which is kind of surprising, but awesome. That's a good reprint, guys. Hey, thanks. We'll take it. Thrashing Brontodon seems like the kind of card that should be evergreen, you know? Maybe not in every single standard, but I'm not mad. It's cool to have Thrashing Brontodon still around. It's a nice little piece. But anyway, there's even better uncommons to my mind, like Corpse Knight. This is one of the best looking cards of the day to me, just hands down. But this is 2 mana, a white and a black for a 2/2 Corpse Knight. There's a 2/2 Zombie Knight. Excuse me. With whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. All right, first things first. I really like the 94, 95 art on this. It really takes me back. I like that a lot. But the function of the card is just balls out. It's completely ridiculous. This is pretty nasty. Not only is it a zombie, but it's also a knight, so it fits into 2 really good decks. You know, black-white zombies back with Liliana for the next 3 months. We might be able to pull that off. 4 mana Liliana for Min-19. Could be good. But this is also just good in black-white knights, right? Another really good 2-drop knight that goes well in that deck because you're dropping a bunch of creatures anyway. There's also Hero Precinct 1. I just brought that deck up. But this would be a sweet 2-drop for Esper Hero if you don't get Hero on turn 2. This is a pretty good 2-drop for that deck. And if you do get Hero on turn 2, this is a great 3 or 4-drop for that deck as well, because every time you play a multicolored spell, look at that, you're going to get a drain on your opponent, because this doesn't care if the creature's a token or not, which is really sweet. That means it goes good with the White Finale or March of the Multitudes, but this is just going to go really well in any aggro deck that's playing a bunch of creatures. This is going to be worth a bolt's worth of reach on average in some games. So this card is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to be trying to jam it into every Orzhov deck I can possibly put together. This goes well sort of with the Afterlife mechanic, twice as many creatures to get triggers off of. So I really like that. In a way, it's kind of a blood artist, because if you sacrifice a creature with Afterlife, you'll still get a ping towards your opponent. It kind of works like a blood artist in that way. So there's just so much to like about this card, and it does so much in the Orzhov color combination that I imagine it's probably going to see some real play. I like this thing a lot. It might be hands down one of my, maybe actually my real favorite card of the day. But there is one more uncommon to look at before we get into the rares and mythics and stuff today. And I think this is probably the biggest shoe-in, guaranteed, for almost day 1 standard play. And that's Flame Sweep. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an instant. Flame Sweep deals 2 damage to each creature except for creatures you control with flying. Let's just replace this Fiery Cannonade in sideboards on day 1. I like Corpse Knight a lot, so much. But again, if I had to pick an uncommon that's guaranteed to see play that got, newly, freshly minted today, it's probably this one. Blue-Red Drakes wants this, even though they already sometimes will play a copy of Fiery Cannonade in their main deck, but very often a couple in the sideboard. This is just much better for them, because sometimes you did Fiery Cannonade, and now your Enigma Drake or your Crackling Drake can get cleaned up by a shock on the other side of the table, and you don't want that. And this keeps that from being a possibility. So that's good right there, but pretty much any red deck that wants a, low-grade sweeper, which is a lot, decks that don't play white for Deafening Clarion or whatever, just mono red decks, might actually want this, especially if mono red mid-range is a real thing, and it almost certainly will be when Chandra hits the field. So, I really like a lot about this card. And I think that as far as red sweepers go, it might not be Anger of the Gods or anything, but it's going to be a really good replacement for a card that's seen at least a decent amount of play in Fiery Cannonade. Now, the first rare that I want to talk about today is Wake Root Elemental. It's a 6 mana, 4 and 2 green for a 5/5 elemental. And if you pump 5 green mana into it, you can untap a land you control and make it a 5/5 elemental creature with haste that is, of course, still a land. Now, this is one of a couple of rares today, to me, that screams, core set big creature rare that we'll never see real play in standard. Although, I will give it to you, yeah, Nissa exists, so maybe, if you play Nissa, and then on your next turn you play this, it's at least somewhat likely that you'll have the mana to make one of your lands a 5/5, which is good. And it untaps it, with Nissa out, that's a bunch of mana. Then you can +1 Nissa, untap another forest, so it could really lead to a lot of mana over the course of a few turns. And if you actually ever get the Nissa emblem, which is not unheard of, it's not super uncommon to do that, then suddenly you got a bunch of indestructible 5/5. So yeah, it could do things with Nissa, but again, I kind of doubt it. I just think there's probably better ways to use those slots in your Nissa deck. But you know, a card that really signifies the I'm a big dumb bulk rare from core set philosophy is Atemsis All-Seeing. 6 mana, 3 and 3 blue for a 4/5 legendary Sphinx with flying. You can pay 2 and a blue to tap it and draw 2 cards, then discard a card. And whenever Atemsis All-Seeing deals damage to an opponent, you may reveal your hand. If cards with at least 6 different converted mana costs are revealed this way, that player loses the game. So that is just an insanely difficult alternate win condition to pull off. You have to have almost a full grip, first of all, and all of those cards have to be different mana costs, all the way up to 6, which is crazy. It's really difficult to do, even with split cards in the format. Like, yeah, Discovery Dispersal helps you do this, but, like, still probably not good enough. It has to hit for damage, not combat damage. Keep that in mind. It's a little sly wording there. You can just put, like, an aura on this that makes it tap for a damage, and then suddenly you can win. If, again, you have the requisite number of cards in your hand with the requisite number of different casting costs. It's just really difficult to pull off, and the best use you'll get out of this is probably the pre-release, where it's just a 4/5 flyer. They'll just win, so do that. But I really doubt that you're going to ever pull off the alternate win condition on this. Now here is a cool rare creature. This is Dread Presence, and it looks awesome. This is really cool art. It's 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 3/3 Nightmare. And whenever a swamp enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. You draw a card, and you lose a life, or Dread Presence deals 2 damage to any target, and you gain 2 life. And it's awesome. In mono black, that is really, really good. And it's probably more of a commander card than anything else, but even in standard mono black, yeah, I know it's like lightning strikeable, but I also don't care. If you get like any value out of this, it's really good. You know, the moment that you play a swamp, it's replaced itself. If you choose the draw a card and lose a life option, then it's at the very least replaced itself, which is good enough, but it can also just shoot something. You know, at that point, it's a Ravenous Chupacabra, but a little bit better because it gained you life and was much easier to cast, although it's almost certainly only going to go in mono black. Although I do want to point out, we've got a bunch of, like, shocklands in standard that are swamps and also produce other colors. So, like, maybe, it could be in a 2 or 3 color deck as long as that deck has enough shocklands in it, but highly doubtful. But I will say that no matter what, as long as, you know, as soon as you play your first swamp, the card is paid for itself and has gotten you some value. You can do that the turn you play it. You know, just wait till turn 5 or whatever, play this, and then play a swamp. It's easy as that. But next, let's take a look at Chandra's Regulator, one of my favorite songs. It's just 2 mana. 1 and a red for a legendary artifact. Whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, you may pay 1. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. And you can also pay 1, tap it, and discard a mountain or red card to draw a card. Once you do get a Chandra down, being able to copy abilities for 1 mana is really good, almost no matter what Chandra we're looking at. 6 mana Chandra, sweet to copy any of those abilities, obviously, but new baby Chandra at 3 mana, really good. 4 mana Chandra from War of the Spark, you know, Fire Artisan, really sweet. Even if all you're doing is copying the, you know, draw a card, the exile a card from your library, you can play it. Copy that for 1 mana. Yeah, it's really good. You're drawing 3 cards a turn at the price of a whole mana. That seems really awesome. I think this card might actually see some play in the, again, in Chandra.deck, if nothing else. But even in mono red decks that just kind of incidentally play Chandras, there's a couple of good abilities, because the second ability might as well just be discard a card, because all your cards are mountains and red cards. So there's a lot of good stuff about this, and at a low cost of 2 mana, I really think this could be real. Now, there is one more rare to talk about, but I'm going to hold it till the end of the video and give you a quick fix on your mythics. First of all, there's Rian, Angel of Rebirth. This is the Buy a Box promo, just to keep it straight here. This is not in the set proper. This is a Buy a Box promo, and I think they've hit a pretty good balance here. This is 5 mana, 2 and Naya colors, red, green, and white for a 5/4 flying legendary angel. And other multicolored creatures you control get +1/+0. And whenever another multicolored creature you control dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So that's good with Niv Mizzet. For either one, right? It's still, obviously, Niv Mizzet Reborn, this is a pretty good support card for, but aside from that, I'm just not really seeing the card do awesome stuff, that's good. You want that from your Buy a Box promo. It looks like they want this to do a little bit more than, like, I don't know, the Haunt of Hightower did. But still, I'm not sure that it's the best standard card in the world. Relatively high investment here. The Anthem actually isn't great. for the cost that you're putting into it, but you do get a pretty fat flying body that can be lava coiled, so I don't know about that. But again, these are all balance patches, basically, that make the card not entirely unplayable. Let me put it that way, but still definitely puts some restrictions on playing the card. And again, some checks. That's always important when you're constructing any card, let alone a buy a box promo, that you don't want to go off the rails in terms of price. You don't want another Nexus of Fate on your hands. And I think that they've, again, struck a good balance with this. It's really good with multicolored creatures. Okay, yeah, I'll give you that much. But again, the investment's really high. And these days, like, 5-drops have to be insanely good to be playable in Standard. So I'm not sure it's quite there. And I kind of like that. It's more of a commander than anything else. And that's, again, kind of where you want to be. Now, another 5-drop mythic that got previewed today that I think is actually pretty good is Cavalier of Flame. This is 2 and 3 red mana for a 6/5 elemental knight. You can pay 1 and a red to have creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. When it enters the battlefield, yeah, there's a lot more on this. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. And when it dies, it deals X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control, where X is the number of lands in your graveyard. Alright, well, this has a sweet ETB trigger, a sweet dies trigger, and a sweet activated ability, and it's pretty above rate, you know? I mean, I guess a 5-mana 6/5 isn't, like, amazing, but it's at least on rate, if nothing else. That's about what you'd expect to pay for those stats. So, yeah, I like a lot about this card, like a ton. And I just said 5-mana cards have to be really good to be playable in Standard, but I think this just about hits the mark. The only thing keeping it from seeing play, in my mind at least, is probably just the fact that Skargan Hellkite exists, and the fact that, like, 5-mana Sarkhan exists. Like, if you're playing 5-mana red cards, there are probably going to be better options in this the entire time it's in Standard. But it's another card for the Lands Matter decks, which is probably good, but again, I'm not sure it's quite there. Just the, I know, buddy, you're here, and I love you. But, and you, obviously, you like this card. You got a lot to say about it. I can see why the Ziggs likes it so much, you know? Ziggy has a pretty good eye for cards a lot of the time, so if he says it's decent, I gotta agree. Let's check out Ajani, Strength of the Pride. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. You can +1 it to gain life equal to the number of creatures you control plus the number of planeswalkers that you control. You can -2 Ajani to create a 2/2. You can just create an Ajani's Pridemate. That's seriously what it says. Create a 2/2 creature named Ajani's Pridemate that does Ajani's Pridemate stuff. Or you can just zero this. This is an interesting ability. If you have at least 15 life more than your starting life total, exile Ajani, Strength of the Pride, and each artifact and creature your opponents control. Now, it's not exactly easy to get to 35 life, but if you do, you win. You just win the game. I like that these life gain decks have a really, really good way of winning the game other than Resplendent Angel. Resplendent Angel was kind of the best way for white decks that want to gain life to win. Yeah, they do have a Johnny's Pridemate. Now they've got a million. I joked on Twitter the other day that black-white life game players on Arena seem to have 10 copies of a Johnny's Pridemate in their deck. They just always get it on turn 2. Well, now they do have 10 copies of a Johnny's Pridemate in their deck. It seems pretty good. And this is specifically like only good in that deck, I think, because again, multiple copies of Pridemate is sweet, and you can make the most out of this +1 in those decks, because the +1's bad. I just throw that out there. The +1 is fairly bad. It doesn't affect the board in any way. It doesn't really protect a Johnny in any way. Even if it gains you like 5 life, it's not great. So that's like the worst thing about the card. But making a Johnny's Pridemates is sweet, and zeroing to effectively win the game once you're at the proper life total, that's also good. Because again, especially if they can't find their Resplendent Angel, sometimes these life gain decks can gain like 40 life, but Esper will turn the corner on them, and just it really doesn't matter how high their life total got. Esper can still cleanly win against them once they establish control. And there's a bunch of decks that do that against life gain right now. Once you've got life gain on the ropes, it is pretty easy to take huge chunks out of their armor at a time once you've established control of the board. Well, this makes it so that you don't get a board state once they get past a certain life total, and they pretty much just win, and that might be worth taking a look at. But let's talk about the last card of the day by going back to that rare that I teased earlier. This is Scheming Symmetry with really sweet art, but what do you expect from Seb McKinnon these days? He's killing it lately. This is just 1 black mana. The card's really good too. That's why I saved it for last. 1 single black mana for a sorcery. Choose 2 target players. Each of them searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. This card's crazy. 1 mana tutor. It's a vampiric tutor, kind of. Or what is it? Imperial tutor? I always forget the exact name of it, but still, so it's 1 mana tutor, everybody. What do you expect? I'm amazed at the number of people that are like, nah, this card's not there. What are you talking about? 1 mana tutor, like if nothing else. This is a really desirable commander card that can help you play diplomatically, you know. Don't go get something that'll mess me up, and I won't go get something that'll mess you up, kid. And that actually seems like a really good way of playing the card. A 1 mana tutor in commander, that's $20 right there, right? But I think there's just so much you can do with this card in multiple formats. Like, this is vintage playable if you're doing the right stuff, but it's modern playable too, so long as you just, I don't know, thought scour them right after you play this card. Then it seems dumb, right? It's very good. There's also lots of ways just in standard to get this to work. Andrea Mengucci's the one that spoiled this card, and when he did so on Twitter, he talked about the interaction with Teferi Time Raveler, which, yeah, baby T, big sweet T, all you gotta do is go like, huh, I can play sorceries on your turn now, and suddenly you get your card first, which makes this card freaking unbelievable. So if nothing else, the presence of baby Teferi makes this a playable standard card. But in case you wanted an encore on like why this is good in standard, there's also Thief of Sanity. That's a card that exists. So if you play this with a Thief of Sanity in play, yeah, they're probably not going and getting their best card just so you can thief it off the top of their library. But in that case, you've already won. And people have already talked about a lot the fact that this combos really well with like Vicious Rumors. In standard, you can be doing that if you want to. Plus, if you have like an Ashiok on the battlefield, you can just mill it away. From your opponent's side, or a Jace. That seems hilarious because not only will you mill the card away from your opponent's library, you'll draw the card off your library if you have a Jace. Like, jeez, card's just crazy. But there's also like Archive Trap. That's a funny trick, right? So like, I actually think this has so many different uses that I don't know, can't wait to get in the lab with it. There's just combo decks will probably love this. Obviously, Esper decks with Baby T will love this. There's just too many things to do with it for the card to end up being bad. And even if it never sees a single day of standard play, you'll see all the commander play until that's not a format anymore, which will be literally never. So go ahead and get this while you can. But did I say that was the last card? Turns out it's not, because I've just reloaded Mythic spoiler, and we got a few bonus cards today that I haven't even read yet. I've actually read like 2 of these, and one of them is a ridiculous reprint that signals that we'll get a cycle of reprints. We'll talk about it, but anyway, let's look at Thought Distortion and learn what this card does first, aside from just have crazy art. Looks really good. But anyway, it's 6 mana. That's a whole lot of mana. 4 and 2 black for a sorcery that cannot be countered. That's cool. Target opponent reveals their hand. Exile all non-creature, non-land cards from that player's hand and graveyard. So that looks alright. 6 mana again is a ton. That is so much. So I'm not even sure how good it is against Esper, but it's probably pretty good against Esper. It can't be countered, and it's just going to get rid of literally everything. I mean, they play nothing but non-creature cards, and they very likely won't have lands in their hand by the time you cast this. So I don't know. It could actually see some sideboard play, but again, 6 mana is a lot. So let's look at Infuriate, which actually is probably a better card. This is just 1 red mana for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. The Feather decks will probably still want Salmon Sprint over a card like this. Reckless Rage too. They play a lot of 1-drops in the Boros deck, so I'm not sure this goes in, but just in terms of raw power, this is a really good rate in red for what's basically just, you know, 1 step off of a Giant Growth, and that's really good for a color like red that doesn't usually get that kind of power for 1 mana. Aside from that, there's Aether Gust, though. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant. Choose target spell or permanent that's red or green. Its opponent puts it on the bottom of their library, or the top or the bottom of their library. So this, another color hosing 2 mana card. This time it's an instant, so this is definitely going to be a cycle, it appears. And this one's not so bad, especially considering you can hit spells too. And it's basically like a remand. So that's kind of nice against certain colors, but I'm not sure how good it's going to be or how much sideboard play it actually sees. Let's move on to Leyline of Sanctity, everybody. Jeez, this is 4 mana. You know what Leyline of Sanctity does, but I'm going to read it anyway, in case you're new around these parts. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for an enchantment. If Leyline of Sanctity is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. So, yep, that's good. You have hexproof. This is the card. Everybody. They're reprinting Leylines. I thought they were going to do that in the last set. When we saw Leyline Prowler, I was like, oh, there's going to be Leylines here. But no, we had to wait until core set. So, sweet. really sweet. We needed these reprinted to keep the price down as much as possible, and these could actually be standard playable too. You know, I was just talking about how mono red burn might be real. But now that we see this, I'm not so sure. But let's look at a 4-mana mythic creature that I have yet to actually read. We will discover this card together. This is Kaikar. That's a name. Kaikar Wind's Fury. 4 mana, 1 in Jeskai colors. A blue, a red, and a white. For a 3/3 legendary bird wizard with flying. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying, and if you sacrifice a spirit, you can add 1 red mana to your mana pool. So it's like a legendary and much better Murmuring Mystic. And in Standard, you can play Murmuring Mystic and this in your deck, and that seems really good. So I like that proposition, and just get all of the birds and spirits, I guess. It seems nice. But there's also like already spirits in Standard. You can play alongside this, sacrifice them for red, so it's kind of like a Skirk Prospector for spirits. That's a weird thing to say. You can also make the spirits deck like Death, Faux Shiz, Jeskai in Modern, so that seems neat. Although, it's boltable in Modern and it costs 4 mana, so it's probably not there in that format. And even in Standard, it's like Lightning Strikeable for 4 mana, so I'm still, again, I'm not quite sure it's there, but look at all the stuff this does. You know, like ramps you on mana, that seems good. And just the ability to not only fly itself and get through for some damage, but just create a bunch of spirits over the course of the game. It all seems really, really good at a 4-mana raid. And although I'm not sure it makes Jeskai a real deck, this could be a Jeskai control finisher. So keep that in mind too. There's a lot of really good things about this. But probably the best thing about this is getting to see like a bird, not even like a really humanoid bird, like this is just a straight up bird, like doing a Kamehameha. Like cocking it back for the Kamehameha. Like the art is kind of hilarious on this card, but that doesn't mean that it won't end up seeing some amount of Standard play possibly. And again, even if it doesn't, this is another one of those cards it's probably going to end up seeing Commander play forever. It looks really fun in that format too. And that concludes Monday's Core Set 2020 spoilers. That was the first spoiler video, but that's the first of many. So, and mark your calendars and subscribe if you haven't done it yet, because my exclusive preview comes on the 24th of this month. That's a week from today, next Monday. Aside from that, you can like the video if you enjoyed it. Hit up TCG Player to pre-order any any M20 stuff that they got for pre-order. I'll go ahead and put an affiliate link up to that page so you can pre-order stuff from M20. Do that because it helps my big butt. Just when you click that link. So do that if you want to, and hit the Patreon link down there in the description to really help the channel out. All I ask for is $1 a month, and I'll let you know what decks we're doing, what videos are coming up 24 hours in advance, and I'll let you vote on what decks you want to see too. And I will catch you cats later. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.